all this history as a businesswoman in Venezuela, in Colombia, I'm nobody. What I had been doing for years didn't work anymore. I had to leave it behind to be reborn. I'm not the same entrepreneur today. I was an entrepreneur before being a mom, after becoming a mom. To the bank, I was 18 years old. If this happens to me, what is left for those people I'm seeing cross the bridge? I'm not playing at being a businesswoman. This is my life project, and it must work. We've already managed to provide financial services to more than 30,000 people. The no is already on the table. What you must go out and look for is the yes. We need more people who think about people. We need more people who want to help build a better world.
Welcome to Catch The Upswing for a very special episode from Lima. I'm here with Magreth Gutiérrez, the founder and CEO of the Fintech AAvance, and you're listening to the dubbed English version. Hay una versión original en español aquí en este mismo canal. So I was going to dub myself in English, but oh my god, I got such a great AI voice in English. I really love it. I hope you enjoy it too. Welcome, Magreth.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be by your side.
Magreth, I'd love to start with your own story because everything you've built with Avance is impressive, but it's even more impressive when you realize the whole backstory, how all of this started. And you've talked about, I think the word you used is a professional heartbreak, which is like a kind of professional and personal breakup. What has that stage meant for you? Tell us a bit about what happened at that moment.
Well, Jessica, I migrated in 2008 to Venezuela. I arrived as a Colombian looking for opportunities. Clearly in Venezuela, it offered us the opportunity to generate jobs, to work, to develop professionally in a much easier way than probably in Colombia. And I started bringing or exporting a line of clays to Venezuela. And along the way, I met people, and among those people, I met my ex-partner with whom we ended up building a company, giant, Jessica, with a lot of hard work. We started in a 2x2 space with huge dreams and desires and an immense drive to get ahead. And we started representing brands to integrate products into the Venezuelan market. And I ended up, although I started with clay, I ended up leaning towards the food line, and we managed to be one of the largest food importers in Venezuela. I was part of that partnership for 15 years, Jessica, and built very beautiful things with a lot of effort and dedication. In 2016, we decided, because of the situation Venezuela was going through, to expand the company into the Colombian market, and I decided to return to my country, return to Colombia, to be able to generate a new opportunity to have like another foot in another country that would allow us to start making a path, right? And I arrived in Colombia and faced a totally different market, much more competitive, with much smaller quantities of raw material supplies for the food sector. And when I arrived in Colombia, I started to discover a lot of things and transformations in my life, from a personal side to a professional side. And I start with pain to have to realize that my country had a totally different way of operating, and that I had to, in some way, start over to create some other business opportunity, because definitely what I had been doing for years, well, didn't work anymore. And it really happens many times in life. Not necessarily what you lived makes your present, and it doesn't make your future either. It teaches you, but it's not necessarily what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I start to identify the way I meet a new person, a new partner. I become a mom. And the birth of my son makes me go back to the border between Colombia and Venezuela, which is where I was born, and to have a support network. You, being a mom now, can understand me. And in that passing of time, I started to realize that I wanted to have another business opportunity and that I wanted to start building something different. And what I had done for so many years, I had to leave it behind to be reborn, right? Close the cycle to create again. And that's where my expression of professional heartbreak came from. When you build something and at some point you have to leave it to start something new, well, it's like when you have a breakup with a boyfriend, with a partner, and it's the famous heartbreak we call in Colombia, and it's the pain, like the void left by abandoning something to be reborn. And that was the professional heartbreak I had to live through. I lasted more or less, I had pre-heartbreak, heartbreak, and post-heartbreak. The pre-heartbreak lasted about 2 or 3 months, which was the period I gave myself to start thinking about how I was going to make the decision and how I imagined my life without what I had been living for so many years, until the precise moment arrived. I lived the heartbreak at the moment I made the decision and faced the people I had to tell about what I was deciding. And then, well, it's the pain, right? Because when you change jobs, when you close both personal and professional cycles, it's a new dawn. And that new dawn is hard. Not necessarily when you get back up in that new dawn is everything perfect. Things start to change, and change generates commotion in people's lives. That's the story of the heartbreak.
A quick note of thanks and a small invitation. If you're enjoying this podcast, subscribing is one of the easiest ways to support the work and help these conversations travel further. I really appreciate you being here.
And I wonder, I mean, from everything you've lived, right? Having built a professional identity, a working life for many years, and suddenly having to start from scratch. I mean, what does that do to you emotionally? How did you feel?
I was very afraid. Jessica, fear is part of walking through life. When you know and learn to identify and recognize the sacrifices, the challenges faced when undertaking and starting to build anything in life, that generates fears, it generates apprehensions, it generates uncertainty. And when people talk to me about entrepreneurship after 15 years of having a company where we had almost 220 employees, well, for me, thinking about starting a business was, I imagine a person walking with a sack on their back loaded with things. And I said, am I willing to walk and put on the sack? That was what came to my mind, right? Like the association I felt at that moment. And of course, the new beginning was hard for us. It was hard for me emotionally, mentally, physically, but it has also forged in me a new person. No, I'm not the same entrepreneur today because I was an entrepreneur before being a mom. And I also became an entrepreneur after becoming a mom. And those two women are completely different. When I started a business when I was young, which thank God through hard work, I managed to grow and was successful in what I did. I was thinking a lot about myself, right? About how much I could achieve for myself in assets, in money, in the bank account, in trips, in It was a much more self-centered approach. When I'm an entrepreneur, after becoming a mom, I don't just think about myself anymore. Now I have a human being, a soul, a life to build for. So that entrepreneurship becomes and is rooted more in the heart, in the feeling of love, of giving your son, your daughter, that human being the best, right? So now it's an entrepreneurship more rooted in feeling, in how this has to work, not just for me, but for my family. So it becomes a different kind of entrepreneurship. Did I have fears? Yes, I still experience them. In fact, I still experience them. But well, the road hasn't been easy, but we are alive. Yesterday, precisely when I arrived at the Pro Mujer event, and I see faces that I hadn't seen in maybe a year, in this whole area, the humanitarian sector, which we all know what it's about, with all these setbacks that have happened in the last year. And they said to me, "Oh, Magreth, how nice to see you again." And I said, "Well, it's wonderful to see each other again, because if we're here, it means we're still alive and that we're being successful in what we're doing." And it really is a great blessing to be able to build, to make an effort, and to know that at some point, all that sowing and all that work is reflected in the results you generate.
Yes, I find what you mentioned very interesting, right? That it wasn't just starting basically from scratch, but also already being a mom with that responsibility. And I imagine that's even a responsibility that weighs much more than if you were just doing it for yourself. But now with that responsibility, right, also being a woman who has always been like very financially independent, also like with business-minded, hardworking, right? I think that takes a lot of courage starting over, but in a way, maybe it's also like you don't have a choice, right? Because you're a mom, and somehow you have to keep going.
When people talk to me and say, "But Jessica, starting a business at 25 is not the same as at 40. They are two different times. When you start to create a company after coming from a successful model in your life, and you decide that this is your plan from A to Z, that plan has to work. How? By all means, it must work. Sometimes when they ask me and say, no, I'm not playing at being a businesswoman. This is my life project, and it must work. Whether you change, you pivot, you can turn right, left, up, down, but it must work." So you start to create, it's a vehicle that shapes itself depending on what you experience to generate well-being and fulfill that responsibility of love towards your family, right? And towards what you do.
Yes. What do you think you have learned through that difficult experience that you wouldn't have learned about leadership, the topic of entrepreneurship, in any other way?
I think what I've learned the most is to connect with faith. Sometimes we feel that everything is taken for granted, right? And that if I act, I generate a result. But I have learned to live by faith. I believe that the effect is you take action, but the creator is the one who decides. And I have learned to live and to trust that even the no's are God's will, and that everything must arrive at its precise moment. That way of living, that entrepreneurship and that leadership is what I transmit and we transmit to each other in the team constantly. When things don't happen, we are also grateful. And that is part of this new entrepreneur and this new role that I am living with this new company.
Now, Avance to Fintech is dedicated to serving the unbanked population and also specifically migrants who I imagine often have a story similar to yours. What was the moment, the experience, or the story you saw among the migrant population that made you feel that more than feeling something or relating to them, you really wanted to create a solution and change something on a much larger scale?
Jessica, since I lived in Venezuela, I felt a deep gratitude for that country. And I felt a deep gratitude for what I lived in Venezuela, for what that country gave me. My sisters, from my friends who became my sisters, my friends who became my family, all those people who opened their arms to me. And I've always been grateful for that, right? And when I returned to Colombia and I have the opportunity to be at the border, it was this whole episode of mass migration from Venezuela to Colombia, where approximately 3 million people left wishing to stay in Colombia. And in total, there were almost 7.5 million Venezuelan migrant people who left to look for opportunities in the world. And when you cross that border, and besides, I'm from there, I was born there, I know the migration context perfectly because I lived it all my life. And I start to identify those conditions, that energy that was felt on that bridge, Jessica, that underworld, that dark world where children passed, women passed, men passed, walking, looking for an alternative in life, looking for an opportunity, right? And I arrived in Colombia also under other conditions, very blessed in a privileged economic position because I came to open the branch of a company that was already consolidated. And I start to run into financial barriers. And I'm arriving in my country and I come with a financial history from Venezuela. And I arrive in my country to apply for credit for the company to buy a property in Colombia, whatever, a car. And it turns out that to the bank, I was 18 years old. And I was arriving at almost 35 years old. So I was saying, how is that? So all this history as a businesswoman in Venezuela, in Colombia, I'm nobody, right? And I started to run into barriers, financial, and I was saying, if this happens to me, what is left for those people I'm seeing cross the bridge in that need? There wasn't a regularization framework for the migrant population in Colombia yet clear at that time. And, and I start to see that people wanted to arrive in the country. They wanted to generate and make the decision to decide to stay and live with a sense of belonging, of staying permanently in the country without documents, without access to financial products. I'm a financial engineer. Clearly, I have as a basis that part of the economic development of a human being is access to financial services. In Latin America, we need credit even to change a blender because people, unfortunately, don't have a high income level that allows them to save to be able to change their appliances. Something as basic as that. And so I started to identify all those problems. And I was like, I have to give back to Venezuela and to Venezuelan migrants in some way for all that love they gave me. How do I do it? Right? So I remember that in the last few years, when we started exporting food from Colombia to Venezuela, I started bringing in very cheap brands because I was realizing that in supermarkets in Venezuela, even buying a snack was out of reach for a vulnerable person, for a humble person. So a person would go to buy a snack and it could cost them $7, $8 when the minimum wage was $3. And I was like, there is no food inclusion in Venezuela. A person can't even eat a snack in Venezuela. So we started bringing brands,
Wow.
very cheap brands over there. And I feel like that's where that feeling of being able to help was born, right?
I wanted to briefly highlight a long-term partnership that shows what can happen when girls are trusted with leadership. Shoko works in close partnership with the grassroots organization MDYM in Cucuta on the Colombian-Venezuelan border, supporting girls and young women who fled the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela and are navigating extreme vulnerability, from being pushed out of school to getting trapped in sexual exploitation and violence. For transparency, I founded Shoko to help facilitate and amplify this kind of locally led work, but the programs themselves are designed and driven on the ground. One initiative that emerged through this partnership is Roots of Change. It started as a pilot, and the results went beyond expectation. Girls didn't just participate, they stepped into leadership, they became peer educators, mentors, and multipliers, shaping what change should look like in their own communities. Because of that, the local team is now keen to expand this approach to other cities across Colombia, including Bogota, Medellin, and Cartagena, adapting it to new contexts while keeping girls' agency at the center. I wanted to share this because it's a powerful reminder that when girls are given the space, trust, and tools to lead, they don't just change their own lives, they bring others along with them.
I didn't know I was living it. I didn't know I was going to work for the financial inclusion of migrants. And today I don't just work for Venezuelans, I work for migrants in general. That Colombia who goes to Ecuador, that Ecuadorian who goes to Brazil, that Salvadoran who is being deported from the United States, that Venezuelan who is returning to Venezuela, that Costa Rican, that Honduran who is moving to El Salvador. And we started to identify a lot of internal migrants in Colombia too. People who move due to forced displacement, from violence, from climate change. And we all started to be migrants, people on the move, right? And I start to see that reality there. And I was like, Venezuelan migrants definitely need access to financial products to be able to develop. And that's when the desire to help started. And we started to create hand in hand with our partners and to structure a fintech when fintech wasn't talked about much in Colombia. There weren't many clear models regarding regulation. To be able to identify how we could sell that project to a bank that would lend us their back end to be able to reach that person with a clean vocabulary and say to the guy who sold hot dogs, to that guy who was crossing the border, to that mom who was developing a business opportunity on the border, and say to them, we are opening a financial product for you, migrant, with the backing of a Colombian bank, and your money won't be lost, right? So how did we start to work and structure all of that? Not only from the path of wanting to help, but from the path of building safe, reliable, and transactable financial products for a person who is arriving in a country they don't know, in a regular situation, undefined, and with a lot of dreams and desires in their heart and in their suitcase that had to be supported in the process. And that's how our fintech was born.
Wow.
It's AAvance is the result, and I will always say, Jessica, of the love and gratitude I feel for Venezuela. Today we serve other types of people, but AAvance was born because of that.
Wow. It's incredible. And also that love is so deep and strong as to also face so many obstacles or challenges, right? Because you already mentioned that even for a more privileged person, it was already difficult to access the financial system. You also mentioned that fintech as a concept wasn't very established yet. There was no regulatory framework. The banks didn't understand it. Also, like for you to access funding to raise that company and start building it, and also serving a very vulnerable population that also remained, especially back then, like in a not very official situation, right? They arrived maybe without permission to be in the country, or like without documents. How did you manage to do it with so many challenges at the same time? And what was the maybe the reaction of the banks? You just mentioned that your dream was a fintech backed by a bank. How did the banks react?
Look, I think that in all the purposes that one walks, there are special people along the way. Avance was born in 2020, but it goes to market with its MVP. It finishes until late 2023. Regarding the regularization of the population, there is an intervention by a humanitarian entity in Colombia that manages to finance with Migración Colombia the regularization of migrants. And we manage in some way. Check. Then it was talking to a bank that in Colombia had a banking as a service model developed and that wanted to see migrants at that time as a business opportunity. And we found a human being with a capacity for technological development and to whom many of the fintechs that exist today in Colombia under digital correspondence models owe our existence, which was Banco Cop Central, led by Ronnie Ramirez, who has already departed, who has already died. Ronnie died about 2 years ago, but he was the person who saw at that moment the possibility of being able to help fintechs under digital correspondence models in Colombia, and to take into account that we shouldn't only serve Colombians with what several of us were doing, but that Avance could have the opportunity to serve migrants. And he was the one who understood the business and sold it to his board of directors at the bank so that they would accept our inclusion model for migrants. So when we managed to do that, which took about 1.5 years, we did the second check. Mm-hmm. And then we needed to identify a franchise that also thought about being able to offer financial products with that backing that I was looking for those people, because I was like, they live with enough vulnerability every day for me to come and offer a financial product that the person doesn't even understand or comprehend and also feels insecure about using. And we got Visa to set its eyes on us. And we started to make a synergy between those three ways: regularization, support, and banking as a service model. A franchise, a big franchise behind the operation, providing real financial products, and our operation of working on the ground, calling on migrants so they could access a financial product. I'm talking about 2023. Mm-hmm. And that process took us about 2 years. So Avance was born during that growth, and we took steps as things fell into place. But I repeat, I insist, it was specific people we met along the way who created those opportunities to make things happen, always guided by God's perfect timing. We were set to launch in November 2023, and we launched in November 2023. That's how it was.
Wow. Yeah, and what really catches my attention is that this story also shows how important one person, just one single person, can be within an institution that maybe doesn't move, but that person can make all the difference.
Absolutely,
Guiding
Jessica.
the way.
Absolutely. That's it. If that person at that moment hadn't understood what we wanted to do, probably neither AAvance nor other fintechs operating in Colombia under that model in that bank would exist. It was the right person at the right time. It's what they call luck, right? The right person at the right time, just at the right moment.
I think it's also a reminder to all of us that even though we feel like we're just one person with a different perspective, our actions can open doors that we might not even be aware of at the time, right? But if we dare to look for solutions even within systems or institutions that historically haven't found those solutions, we can achieve so much and really make a huge difference in someone's life.
Huge. And I was totally opposed to wanting to start understanding a different business from the one I had been doing for so many years. I came from a business that I already knew inside and out, like the back of my hand. I knew the international operation perfectly, how a brand should be built in Venezuela, how to bring products to Venezuela, what the most powerful distribution channels were. And from one moment to the next, my life changes. And I start to feel the need to want to help in a different way and to change myself, my way of thinking and my way of living, to give life to a new opportunity that probably transforms and supports the development of another human being's life. At AAvance, we've already managed to provide financial services to more than 30,000 people, not only in Colombia, but in other countries. And we've managed to educate and financially certify more than 4,500 people. That's a significant number when the work is done alongside on-the-ground efforts, because it's not the same to have a mass tech product where you throw it out to millions of people and hope to save some of them, or someone will read it, someone will understand it, someone will apply it, as it is when you go out there, roll up your sleeves and say, I'm going to go work on the ground to teach 1, 2, 5 people, and manage to convert and certify 4,500 people in digital and financial education. So they learn to use their financial services and learn to identify all the opportunities that come with being able to generate this education for the development of their lives, and then to find stories of women who want to get ahead, of women who are being emotionally abused, physically mistreated, and start telling them, hey, if you learn to handle your financial life, you're going to empower yourself, and you'll decide if you want to be with that person by choice or by obligation. And then you start living a different life, and women start to understand that with their financial life, they can become independent, make decisions, grow, and create well-being for their children. That, Jessica, has no price tag where I could tell you today, well, they pay me this much for this. No, I mean, it's the power to create from love at a level of consciousness where what you want is to contribute in some way to making another person's life better.
Is there a story you could tell us, maybe as an example, that when you think of that story, you think that's why it was worth it, or that's exactly the reason I founded Avance?
Sure, there are many stories. I know I met a user about 6 months ago a Venezuelan migrant from the border. While she was in her migration process, she was raped by more than 17 men, abused, raped. They brought her in through a human trafficking network. And I met her because she was an advanced user from the very beginning when we started. And she would sit with me and hold my hand and say, I want to thank you because I got the chance through a program with an NGO to join an entrepreneurship program. And I managed, today she has a business selling homemade sweets, right? And Avance has allowed her or supported her along with that NGO, the NGO with its humanitarian arm, to rebuild all those broken business selling homemade sweets, right? And Avance has allowed her or supported her along with that NGO, the NGO with its humanitarian arm, to rebuild all those broken bonds she carried as a person. And we supported the process by telling her, hey, look, you can integrate through a financial product. Come and let us teach you how to do financial preparation, how to create a profile. And she, with that desire to get ahead, and today she is a woman who has gone through and who has evolved. She stayed with her children. She's getting ahead. She has already accessed microcredit lines with financial institutions, and we've managed to support her in her process. And now we see she's also a leader. She not only helps herself now, but she supports many women who have just arrived at the border, helping them to develop and learn about opportunities. That story is beautiful. And like that one, without them having to go through any other type of violence like this girl had to go through, well, there are so many stories of people who arrive. Migrants are very vulnerable, Jessica. When you are a migrant, regardless of the socioeconomic situation you live in, migrating is hard. You're arriving in a new culture, even if they are neighboring countries, even if they are sister countries. The conditions, the culture, the way of thinking, the way of speaking is different. And people arrive a bit lost, disoriented, looking for community, connection. And it's so good that institutions exist and that support processes exist in co-creation to rebuild and give opportunity to a person's life.
And that story, what really catches my attention is that it also describes very well, or teaches us very well, how you are actually transforming lives. And it's something you said before, right? That it's not about pushing a digital product on a massive scale without really seeing what is changing, but the way you are reaching very impressive numbers and you are scaling, but you are doing it in a very conscious way and actually measuring the impact you are going to have on the lives of those people.
Yes, look, about 2 months ago, we started operating in El Salvador. So now I'm not going to talk to you about Venezuelan migrants in Colombia, but about Salvadorans who are being deported from the United States and who arrive in El Salvador totally disoriented, who were in a raid. They detained them. They spend a few days in detention, and then they are expelled from the country to arrive in El Salvador. The government wanted to start giving them aid to be able to help them resettle upon arrival in the country. And look, the fact that they can receive a financial product, in this case, we don't serve them with digital wallets, but with a prepaid card, uh, makes people feel that they are integrating socially and economically, because regardless of the vulnerability that the person is experiencing, that doesn't take away their ability to identify what they need, right? So we start serving them, we deliver the card, and the person has the possibility to, and I go and buy what I need to remedy a bit of what I'm going through, right? In this new reality that I'm facing. It also happens to us in Colombia, no longer talking about migrants, but about vulnerable populations, that we are serving, for example, cases of women who are filing complaints of possible femicides. They get a financial product of ours. We are pre-contracted by an NGO that is serving them. The cards have already been placed with each of them, and the NGO steps in to give them financial support. And what the woman does is she empowers herself, takes her card, goes to buy what she needs, integrates socially and economically, and gets out of the mud she finds herself in. We don't transform her life in the moment, but we help her get out of the hole she's stuck in, right? So let's say that has made those populations in some way be able to transform the manner in which they were being supported and they were being restored. People are being integrated. They are being told, you too, regardless of what you are experiencing, of this migration situation, of this situation of violence, of this situation of displacement, it is temporary. We here can help you so that you can start over, so that you can be reborn. So it's a very beautiful synergy, because AAvance works for NGOs and for governments that implement financial inclusion projects for vulnerable populations. And the fact of being able to unite financial technology with the humanitarian sector, which were totally different worlds, has made us special. So we started building bridges of trust, bridges of integration, bridges of opportunity, so that people can get ahead again.
I would like to go a bit deeper into that aspect of financial freedom, because you just mentioned an example of how violence against women and the lack of economic and financial independence are linked in a very concrete way, right? Can you tell us a bit more about how you see that link and why it is so important? What does it mean in very concrete terms to have that financial freedom?
Look, Jessica, I have always been a woman very focused on my personal production. I feel that part of the security and independence that a woman can have is being able to produce for her own needs and to generate well being for her environment. And the fact that a woman can face her financial situation makes her free, free in the sense that she can make decisions, right? So, uh, look, there are many cases in different socioeconomic situations, because I can't tell you that I only see it in vulnerable populations. I have seen women who for years have endured violence, infidelities, abuse, for not facing their financial situation because they feel they are not capable, or that it is an issue that belongs only to the man. And when the woman starts to learn, to educate herself, and to generate financial opportunities to be able to grow within her business developments, within her entrepreneurship, within her professional development, the woman starts to have freedom and starts to make her own decisions. And they say, no, you are not going to abuse me. You are not going to touch me. I am capable with or without you. So they start to generate opportunities for happier women, for women more capable of providing love, of developing, of generating opportunities. A woman needs to be at peace in her heart and in her soul to be able to progress. And for us, feeling good, feeling secure, feeling peaceful, loved, cared for is an important part of our development as people. So, what we have done over this period of time is work hand in hand with NGOs and governments so that not only does a financial product arrive, but a talk arrives where that woman can find that someone is listening to her, that someone is teaching her, and that someone is talking to her about the future, about what she can do today to improve her future. And we have found wonderful changes, Jessica. A woman likes to save. A woman likes to feel secure with money in the bank, to be able to deliver when she has a difficult situation. A mom likes insurance. A woman likes insurance for her children. So starting to educate women that it's not just about enduring, but that they can actually integrate with the financial system and make it so that through their integration and their development, they can transform their lives is a very powerful element to have a better generation.
Yes, I think it's incredible because really, as you have so much experience from what you've seen firsthand, and all that knowledge is reflected in how you designed your solution. I think it's incredible because it's so much more than financial access, right? It's and I think that's also very important in terms of the difference between having a bank in a country or in a community and actually having a fintech that designs products with all that knowledge and that solution that is like very complete, very holistic, very comprehensive.
When we talk about companies with social impact, we have to understand that even if we want to transform the lives of millions of people, or at least contribute to the transformation of the lives of millions of people, we have to start thinking about one. Mm-hmm. That one gradually leads us to reach the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, and those thousands at some point will build up, will transform into millions. But we have to understand that when we develop projects with inclusion and with a social impact, we must start by thinking about how we are transforming community by community, how we can improve more and more, starting with the vocabulary, the ways we bring information to people. There are many people, Jessica, who don't access financial products because thinking about numbers seems like chaos to them. It seems boring. It seems complex. So it's much easier to pick up the phone and call the loan shark, which is the informal lender in Latin America, and say, lend me 100,000 pesos, even if I have to pay you 800% interest, right? Mm. But when you start with a light vocabulary, with mystique, with love, with kindness, to teach in a simple way what we used to see as so complicated, mm-hmm. It makes the person want to learn. It makes the person want to transform. I also don't believe in mass appeal, that mass products without education work. Mm-hmm. It's no use passing cryptocurrency laws if our populations don't even know how to use a debit card, if the population doesn't even know how to open a digital wallet. We are in a time of transition and evangelization, and we were given the responsibility to educate communities so that digital transformation really reaches our lives. How great to be able to bring programs, even if they are economic aid disbursements accompanied by financial education. There is no inclusion if there is no education. Mm-hmm. And we have worked towards that.
I'd love to hear a bit more about how your whole journey with AAvance has been, being one of the very few women who founded and are leading a fintech, which is a domain that is pretty dominated by men, and also like in a sector that in itself hasn't been the financial sector, which hasn't been very open to innovation or looking beyond traditional finance. Have you also at some point felt underestimated, and how have you managed that world?
Well, I feel like a very brave woman, actually. I learned about the fintech world just a few years ago, and I've learned it from the experience of creating the company. Being a woman in a tech sector, well, you see, in Colombia, we are very few. We have some associations, groups, communities of women in fintech that have allowed us to be able to generate synergies between women CEOs or directors of tech-based companies, not only in the financial world, health tech, different types of fintech in tech-based companies. I've never felt underestimated because I feel that women who have been fierce and who have put, as we say in Colombia, grit into life, for a man to come and overshadow us is pretty difficult, right? In what I've lived and in the experience I bring, well, I've been used to men's worlds where women, instead of feeling underestimated, we become queens. We become the bosses. We become sought after, right? And I've tried to make this female figure feel very well represented by the strength and by the work we've been doing. Sometimes maybe where it is felt is in the difficulty of entering the market, Jessica, and I was telling you about it. Not necessarily the challenge has been from the point of view of CEO as company creation, but as a business opportunity in terms of the possibility of being able to have opportunities with clients that they give you the opportunity to enter. But the blessing is that on that path of how difficult entry is, well, many fall behind. And I am very persistent. So I keep persisting and I keep persisting until they give me the opportunity. And then for them to change you is very difficult. So how beautiful it is this path has been. My purpose has always been to turn men's spaces into opportunities for me, because I'm still the queen.
And what I love about your path and your story is that you don't let yourself, if someone tells you no.
Well, what you said before, right? You see it as things happen for a reason. Thank you, I'll look another way. But you don't let yourself get discouraged or like it doesn't scare you, right? And I think that's something that many entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs experience, that thing of hearing no a million times before reaching one person who says yes. And it's very important not to take it personally, and that persistence. And I think it's something very beautiful, incredible about your mindset, your attitude, right? Of how you are seeing things. What could you recommend to someone who is building a company or has an idea or a vision and is right in the difficult phase where everyone is telling them no, that they don't understand it? How can they adopt that way of thinking?
You have to be grateful for everything that happens. Everything. Be grateful for everything, because everything that happens for the best. The path of entrepreneurship is a hard path. I say that being a business owner is a heroic task that you decide to live, right? And since you're doing a heroic task, it means you are a hero, and you should behave as such. One must be consistent with what one says and what one does. So if I'm saying that I'm doing a heroic task, therefore I'm a hero, well, I must behave like a hero. And the hero doesn't always win the battle. The hero isn't always in glory. How many times does Superman die during the movies, right? How many times do they knock him down and he gets back up again? So it's important to be able to identify that everything that happens for the best, that the no is already on the table. And what you must go out and look for is the yes, regardless of how many frogs you have to eat along the way. And that each of the no's becomes an opportunity to improve because they're telling you no for a reason. So I have to sit down to be able to identify, I'm not doing this well, I have to improve this. And how do I make it so that first meeting I have with a person is no longer a no, but rather I've worked so hard on those objections they've told me and that have guaranteed the no, that now I handle them all and get them to say yes. And that's how it's happened for us. At the beginning, when we went out to sell Avance's products, well, they didn't understand what we wanted to do. Nowadays, the simpler and more practical we make it, we've realized they understand us better, right? The vocabulary, I don't need to use so much difficult vocabulary for people to understand what I do. The simpler I make it, the more neutral I can make it, the more people will understand it and say, okay, now I see how I can work with you. So every time they said no, I'd say, but why not this? Is it that they don't understand me? Is it that I'm not making myself understood? What is it that I'm missing to be able to get to that yes? And it turns out that sometimes it was that we spoke with so many technicalities that people said, well, okay, great, but I don't know how I can integrate it into my NGO. I don't know how I can integrate it into my government. So now what we do is arrive. You have this problem, you have this need, and this is the way I can solve it for you. For the entrepreneur, what they have to do is identify how those no's, how those numbers become an improvement of objection so that at some point that yes arrives and not lose persistence. In an organization, one person might tell you no, but one person is not an organization. They are many people. Are you reaching the right moment or the right person? Are you reaching them in the right context? Are you reaching the right place? Is that the need they really have? Is that the priority they have? Because sometimes it can be very good, but your project is not the priority for the organization. So what are you going to receive there? And it's not necessarily because you're bad, it's because you didn't arrive in the context that was needed. Just as there are other businesses that you didn't expect, and because you've already done things well, boom, the next one arrives, and boom, the next one arrives, and boom, the next one arrives, right? So everything is part of persistence and of the capacity one has to resist. That difficult times are experienced, Jessica? All of them. Because it's not the same to earn money every 15 days with a salary as going out to find how to pay payroll. They are two totally different contexts. Wanting to talk about only the beautiful things is impossible because there are more difficult things than easy ones, right? In that process. But really, the most important thing is to know what is the north you want to reach. And never, my mom taught me this, never lose your north. Never forget where you want to get to. And that is basically what is sought within the path of being a business owner, of being an entrepreneur. 4 years ago, when I came to this Pro Mujer event, Jessica, well, I felt extremely intimidated because I didn't know anyone. I didn't know if the way I was going to express it was the ideal way, if the vocabulary I was using to address the humanitarian sector, that is that gender focus, was ideal. Today, I'm here recording a podcast with you, speaking to other entrepreneurs, following such an important line as the one you lead, carrying banners of transformation. And it has been a path that has been walked and that has been developing because I've wanted it to be that way and because the North has never been lost. This goes AAvance is going to grow and will continue to grow in the years to come because that is what we have as a purpose. And every day we work towards that.
And look, besides, it's not just that, but in those 3 years since you first came to that forum, how many huge projects have you closed since then? Relations with organizations all over the world, very big funding projects, alliances. It's incredible.
Yes, it has been spectacular. I remember that the first year I was at ProMujer, this was in Medellin, the event, and I went hand in hand with Chemonics. We went with USAN to present my pitch for the first time. I will never forget that. It was the first time I presented my pitch at a ProMujer event. And I remember that when I finished doing my pitch, and the director of UN Women was there listening to me, I went behind the little board and started to cry. And I was shaking and crying and shaking and crying. And the girls from Chimonics came over and hugged me and said, Magreth, what's wrong? What happened? And I was saying, I made it. I am capable. I can do it. And at that event, and this is an invitation I make to everyone who participates in events, events have magic, but you have to find the magic. I remember that at that event, Jessica, I sat down to listen to several panels in a very attentive and concentrated way, conscious of what I was experiencing. And on those panels, I met 2X Global. And I wrote down the name of a person I later connected with on LinkedIn. And that person told me, hey, look, this is a certification, blah, blah, blah. I'm leaving, but I can leave you connected. And they're probably going to do a pilot. But for you to be part of the pilot, well, you have to do a lot of things. And I said, well, yes, I want to do it. Please keep me in mind. And when we achieved the certification process, well, I am one of those success stories that the ProMujer event is a great space to connect and to carry out good alliances that mean growth, progress, and opportunities for your organization. The same thing happened with the alliances with NGOs, in the alliance with Visa. Every time I'm at a ProMujer event, I make new friends, new contacts. It's a healthy and beautiful environment to be able to co-create, to be able to establish alliances, establish opportunities. And in every corner where I sit, even if I'm in the bathroom, even if I sit on a sofa, I turn around and ask, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Because that's what we came for. So sometimes we participate in events and we are always with the same people we always know. No, you have to talk, you have to connect, because the world is so big, Jessica, and the blessing comes from the person you least expect.
Yes, exactly.
And when you look, your world has transformed, and it can come out of a ProMujer event. The one who has you and me sitting here today is ProMujer. Thank you, Carmen Correa, for this. Thank you. It is a great opportunity to be able to participate in spaces where they definitely exist, and to participate in a conscious way in those opportunities that you can carry out for the growth of your organization.
Yes, no, it really is a blessing to have spaces like those spaces created by ProMujer in Latin America, and also in the end all over the world, right? Because ProMujer has also connected Latin America as a region with opportunities all over the world. And also what you mentioned, that little moment at the event 3 years ago, where you found out about the certification opportunity, which wasn't something you were looking for, but at that moment, the opportunity came up and you took that first step and you came out with AAvance as best in class of the 2X certification, best in class, which means at a global level, the best among the best, right? Among peers, the best. It's incredible. And I think that not only was a great benefit for AAvance and also for us at 2X to have like that alliance or that very special bond, but also to elevate those stories, those innovations from Latin America and make them visible in the rest of the world.
That is priceless. Relationships are not just about how much money we're going to make here, but where we can get to together, right?
Yes.
And for us, it has been a great honor to be able to always have that 2X certificate. It's showing the whole world that we're not just talking, but that we're doing it, that we're measuring it, that we're being conscious of the focus we're working on and the growth towards which we want to project it. Having the 2X global certification, in fact, is in my deck. On page number 1, on the right side in the upper right part is the 2X global logo. And I always tell people, you must get certified, you must get certified, you must get certified. You not only have to be it, but also look it, right? And being able to implement all this methodology that 2X taught us from the inside, from the women of our own organization, and how we prepare ourselves to serve other women, not just coming out with a pink card or with a gift for women, but really how we consciously work to transform their lives, and we measure the way how we impact their lives, and the result we can have in their lives is what has made us generate this growth. I was talking to you yesterday about the importance of continuing to renew ourselves in the certification, because clearly AAvance starts in a B2C model. And along the way, we became a B2B2C. And the transformation has to keep happening to be able to meet the objectives of our clients in B2B and B2C. How we manage to keep transforming our entire methodology so that the process continues to be real, right? So that the impact continues to be real. We continue to measure the transformation of people's lives. That's what social impact funds are looking for. How you are seriously transforming it, I mean.
Yeah, and where is the evidence, right? Because many can say they're doing something good, but really prove it to me with the exact data.
Measure it for me exactly. What is that impact measurement you are giving to that woman? What is happening with her life, her children, her husband, her business, right? And that for us has been incredibly valuable. Once in a talk we had with TWEX, some large entities were saying, oh, but Avance is still small and that's why they got the certification. This is not about being big or being small.
No, it has nothing to do with
This is about will, about wanting to comply, wanting to do, and wanting to have the certification, right? And we would say, well, but we achieved it, you didn't. Yes, you are big and you didn't achieve it. I did, and here I am.
Yes. And also with fewer resources, right? Being still young, small. No, I totally agree that this is a matter of will, of attitude, and also of integrating that purpose into the DNA of your business, right? That's not something you do being small or big. It's something that is born from the DNA of what you are doing. Exactly.
That's right. That's right.
What are the big next steps for Avance? Where are you going to expand? What's next?
We are happy. We have an expansion project to Europe. Avance is part of the Sprint portfolio, the Global World Food Program. We received a grant at the end of the year 2025 from the government of Luxembourg. And we have been starting to integrate developments in other countries that also need solutions to serve vulnerable populations hand in hand with NGOs and governments. That is why we are already working in El Salvador, in Ecuador. But we are going to expand towards Europe. We have the great intention, if it is God's will, to integrate in Spain to be able to meet the needs of the NGOs that are working in North Africa, that migration that exists within Europe. No, not only facing migrants who are also becoming a very important population in Spain. I don't know if you know, but we Colombians are already touching almost 1 million people who have gone to live in Spain after of the people from Morocco. We are the second nationality with the highest migration to Spain.
And they have spectacular businesses.
They have businesses, they like to arrive and start entrepreneurship. But what we basically want is to continue extending that integration and that execution of financial inclusion programs focused on the needs of NGOs and governments with a global product that allows us to disperse to any part of the world. We are already working on the global development hand in hand with the franchise we are working with, to be able to work in terms of delivering data, traceability, to continue integrating financial technology so that more and more the delivery of humanitarian aid becomes a gateway to real financial services that can be measurable, transactable, reliable, that the donor knows what is happening with that user, preserving perfect data processing policies to protect user data, and that people can really start to integrate and build through humanitarian aid a financial history, and that they can get to access credit lines.
Incredible. Great. Magreth, if someone is listening to this podcast and has to start from scratch, what would you tell them?
That you have to do it. You have to do it. Life is about challenges of when you feel that something has to be created that is already deep in the heart. I know that the entrepreneur who is listening to me and who feels it deep in their heart, that a feeling of love is born, you have to do it. And I invite many entrepreneurs to start thinking about creating business units without forgetting about monetization, but with impact. We have to create companies that generate well-being clearly for those who are creating it, developing it, but that also generate well-being for society. We need more people who think about people. We need more people who want to help build a better world. We need more people who want to keep working with kindness, with love, without forgetting about monetization, but being more cost-effective, more mystical, more affectionate, more about hugging, more about giving, right? The world needs kindness, and you can build companies based on love, with kindness, without forgetting that you have to be cost-effective, that you have to monetize, and that you can develop and you can expand. The world needs companies with social impact.
Thank you so much, Magreth, for everything.
Thank you, Jessica.